Exposure compensation is one of the most powerful exposure controls on your camera. As such, it may very well become one of the most often used controls on your camera. With it, you can easily handle backlighting situations, you can control tonality, you can calm down overexposed highlights. To sum up, exposure compensation lets you adjust the camera's exposure up or down in fractional or whole stop increments. This is the exposure compensation button. Note that it's right behind the shutter button, so it's very easy for me to simply reach right back here. I don't need to take my eye off the viewfinder. I can do this while I'm shooting. To change exposure compensation, I push and hold the exposure compensation button while turning the main dial. Rotating to the left gets me positive exposure compensation, and you can see that it's going up in 1/3 stop increments. Inside my viewfinder right now, down at the bottom, I will also see the little thermometer gauge showing exposure compensation. It goes up to 2 stops in either direction. If I go beyond that, I will simply see a little arrow appear. But up here on top of the camera, I can see exactly how much I've dialed in, and I can go all the way out to 5 stops. Or I can go the other direction and dial in negative exposure compensation. You can see here I am at -2 stops. Same thing, once I go beyond that, I won't see the readout inside. I'll simply see a little arrow appear. However, also in the viewfinder, as I'm changing exposure compensation, I will see my shutter speed and aperture change to reflect the new values that the exposure compensation is yielding. Exposure compensation is a sticky control. You can see that that little plus-minus icon is still lit up. That shows that exposure compensation is dialed in. I had left it at -5 stops, so anytime I remeter, it's going to remeter with a -5 stop exposure compensation until I change this. I can change it to a different value, or I can simply turn it off. Because it's sticky, that means if I go into a situation where I know, wow, I'm going to need half a stop of underexposure or a whole stop of underexposure through this whole thing, I can just dial that in and it will stay there. So to sum up, I might choose to use positive exposure compensation if I'm shooting something and really want to bring more detail out of the shadows. I might choose to use a negative exposure compensation if I am facing maybe a backlight situation and need to calm down some bright highlights to keep midtones from going too bright. Exposure compensation is available in program mode and both priority modes and some scene modes.